The wide black silence of deep space had seen many terrible things over the eons, but nothing quite like the storm that was about to break. For 3 long, dreadful cycles, the Zarn Collective had been pushing its way through the arm of the galaxy humanity called the Outer Veil. The Zarn were not a species you could negotiate with. They were a consciousness of crystal and lightning, a thinking storm that consumed worlds not for resources, but for the unique energy signatures of sentient minds. Every planet they swallowed became a silent, cold tomb. Every fleet they faced became drifting scrap. The Galactic Council, a union of 70 savant species, had tried everything. They sent the elegant plasma lances of the Valkyrie, the swarming drone swarms of the Xylith Hive, and even the reality-bending projectors of the Oln. Nothing worked. The Zarn would simply absorb the energy of the attacks, convert it into more of themselves, and surge forward. Desperation became a physical taste in the recycled air of every council ship that was when a quiet, unassuming ambassador from a species most council members considered barely civilized raised a hand. The human ambassador, a woman named Alara Vance with tired eyes and a voice like gravel, said only 5 words: "Let our war fleet through." The council chambers fell silent. The Valkyrie commander, a proud being of feathered crests, actually laughed. "Your fleet? Humans, you have barely left your own star system. Your fastest ships are slower than our cargo haulers. Your weapons are kinetic. You throw metal at your enemies. This is a war of energy and thought. You have no place here." Ambassador Vance did not argue. She did not plead. She simply transmitted a single data file to the Council's main nexus. The file was not a battle plan or a technical schematic. It was a short video clip. In the clip, a human asteroid mining ship had suffered a hull breach. A worker, in a simple pressure suit, had been caught in the explosive decompression. He was tumbling away from the ship, his oxygen running out, his suit's heaters failing in the absolute cold. Another miner, a woman with a shaved head and a tattoo of a Volf on her neck, did not wait for rescue. She unclipped her safety line, fired her maneuvering thrusters, and caught him. She used her own body to shield him from a spray of debris, then pushed him back toward the airlock. Her suit was shredded. Her skin froze and bled vacuum. But she smiled. The council did not understand the emotion. They analyzed it as a malfunction, a glitch in the human's neural chemistry. Ambassador Vance simply said, "Let us through, or burn." The council, in its desperation, relented. They gave humanity a single jump gate, a backdoor route that would place their fleet directly in the path of the Zarn advance. The battle was expected to take place near the dying star of the Thrax system. Council observers positioned themselves at a safe distance, their sensors already recording what they thought would be humanity's final, honorable defeat. Then the human fleet arrived. It did not look like a council fleet. There were no sleek, curved hulls designed for the graceful redirection of energy beams. The human ships were brutal. They were boxes and wedges, covered in antennae, launch bays, and thick, angular armor that looked like it had been welded by angry giants. The flagship, the UNS Indomitable, had a name painted on its side in bold, white letters, along with a crude drawing of a skeletal figure holding a scythe. The Council's translation software read the words next to it: "Murder Cookie." The fleet numbered to 100 ships. Against the Zarn swarm, which spread across the void like a glittering, angry nebula, to 100 was laughable. The Valkyrie observer, Commander Threx, transmitted a private message to his superiors. Humanity has sent a funeral procession, but then, the humans did something strange. They did not form a battle line. They did not power up energy cannons. They did not send a challenge or a warning. Instead, every single ship in the fleet began to broadcast a single, repeating signal on every frequency: light, radio, gravity, even the quantum whisper bands the Council used for secret communications. The signal was a simple binary code. It was not a code for war. It was a code for location. The humans were not broadcasting to the Zarn. They were broadcasting to each other. And they were dancing. The ships moved. It was not the slow, majestic formation flying of the Council's navies. It was jerky, sudden, and impossibly fast. They strafed, rolled, and spun around each other, their drive plumes forming a chaotic, beautiful web of blue-white fire. To the Council, it looked like panic. To a human admiral, it looked like a perfect, three-dimensional waltz of death. Admiral Kellangian of the Terran Federation Navy stood on the Indomitable's bridge, a cup of black coffee in his hand. He was an old man with a scar that pulled down the left corner of his mouth, giving him a permanent half-snarl. He watched the main view screen as the Zarn swarm shifted, confused. The crystal intelligence was trying to analyze the human formation. It expected a wall of shields. It found a spinning, chaotic pattern that kept changing every half second. "They're hesitating," said his tactical officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Parvati. "Energy readings are fluctuating. They don't know where to strike first." "Good," Jian said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Give them another 10 seconds of confusion. Then light the fuse." The fuse was not a bomb. It was a lie. For months, human intelligence had been studying the Zarn Collective. They learned that the Zarn did not see energy as a weapon. They saw it as food. Every plasma bolt, every laser, every particle beam fired at them was a meal. So humanity's greatest minds decided not to invent a new weapon. They decided to uninvent the concept of energy warfare. They would not feed the enemy. They would show the enemy a mirror. The second phase of the human plan began when a single, small ship broke away from the dancing formation. It was an old vessel, a converted colony transport, with no weapons and minimal shielding. It flew straight toward the heart of the Zarn swarm at maximum acceleration. The Zarn did not even bother to shoot it down. They thought it was a derelict, a piece of debris. They let it pass through their outer tendrils, deeper and deeper into their collective body. When it reached the exact center of the swarm, the ship stopped. Then it began to sing. The song was not music. It was a precise, repeating pattern of ultradense gravitational waves, modulated with a specific quantum frequency. The humans had discovered something the Council had overlooked in their panic. The Zarn Collective was not a single entity. It was a network. Each crystal node communicated with the others through a shared resonance, a hive mind made of pure, coherent light. The resonance had a weakness. It could not tolerate a paradox. The human ship, which they had codenamed Echo, began broadcasting a feedback loop. It was a simple logical statement, repeated in the Zarn's own communication language. "We are you. You are we. To attack is to attack self. To consume is to consume self." Inside the Zarn swarm, the resonance shattered. The central nodes tried to reject the signal, but the outer nodes, the ones that had absorbed so much Council energy, were weak. They were hungry. They latched onto the human signal like a drowning sailor grabs a rope. They began to believe the paradox. And when a hive mind, based on absolute certainty, begins to doubt, it does not become confused. It becomes a screaming, fractal nightmare. The swarm did not collapse quietly. It turned on itself. The human fleet ceased its dance. Every ship locked its primary weapons onto the outskirts of the Zarn swarm, not the center. They were not trying to kill the enemy. They were trying to hurt it. They fired salvos of dumb kinetic rounds, simple tungsten rods accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Each round punched through a Zarn node, not with energy, but with pure, brutal mass. The nodes that were hit did not absorb the attack. They simply shattered. This was the third piece of the human plan. The Council thought human weapons were primitive. They were correct. But a primitive rock thrown at your head will still crack your skull. The Zarn had evolved to fight energy. They had no defense against a 20-ton metal slug moving at 200,000 kilometers per second. The hurting worked. The panicking, self-devouring Zarn swarm began to compress, pulling inward toward the source of the paradox signal. The human fleet tightened its net, firing precise, devastating volleys into the swarm's edges, forcing the nodes closer and closer together. The battlefield, which had been a sprawling cloud of light, became a dense, angry ball of crystal and lightning. Screaming in a frequency that made the Council's sensor officers weep blood from their ears, Admiral Jian watched the timer on his console. 20 seconds remained on the Echo ship's countdown. The ship was still broadcasting, but its hull was buckling under the pressure of the compressed Zarn mass. Its own crew had evacuated hours ago. The ship was a ghost, piloted by a simple automated loop. "All ships," Jian said, his voice calm. "Prepare the erasure. Final firing solution on my mark." The erasure was not a weapon the Council had ever imagined. It was a combination of 4 simple human technologies, each one 100 years old. First, a magnetic field projector, originally designed to deflect solar flares. Second, a high-powered maser array, used to communicate with deep space probes. Third, a cluster of 200 fusion warheads, the kind humanity had first built in its own atmosphere centuries ago. And fourth, a single, tiny, handmade crystal that contained a map of the Zarn's own shattered resonance frequency. The plan was brutal. The maser would create a channel through the compressed Zarn swarm. The magnetic field would hold that channel open. The fusion warheads would be fired down the channel, not to explode, but to create a pulse of pure, raw, unstructured energy. That pulse would pass through the crystal, picking up the false paradox frequency. And then it would spread outwards, not as an explosion, but as a wave of redefinition. Every Zarn node touched by that wave would not be destroyed. It would be convinced. It would instantly, irrevocably believe that it was a separate, individual entity, and that its only purpose was to absorb the nodes around it. The collective would not be killed. It would be atomized by its own endless hunger, spread across the void as a fine, silent dust. Mark, Gian said. The Indomitable fired first. Then the rest of the fleet followed. A single, invisible lance of structured maser light stabbed into the heart of the compressed swarm. The fusion warheads followed, a string of fireflies in the dark. They reached the Echo ship a nanosecond after it was finally crushed into a ball of scrap. The crystal shattered, and the paradox wave exploded outward. The Council observers, from their safe distance, saw the Zarn swarm turn white. Then they saw nothing at all. Their sensors went blind. Their gravity detectors spun in circles. For 3 full seconds, the only thing in the void where the swarm had been was a soft, gray haze, like morning fog over a dead lake. Then the haze began to fall. It did not fall as a cloud. It fell as a gentle, silent rain of microscopic crystal dust, each particle a former god of the void, now nothing more than glitter in starlight. The human fleet did not cheer. There were no high fives or victory dances. On the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Gian set down his empty coffee cup and turned to his communications officer. Signal all ships. Status report. One by one, the reports came in. 2 ships had suffered minor damage from the Zarn's death throes. No human casualties. 0. The fleet had lost not a single soul. They had not won a battle. They had erased an enemy from existence. The Valkyrie observer, Commander Threx, could not speak for a long time. He had watched the entire engagement, the chaotic dance, the suicidal broadcast ship, the brutal kinetic strikes, and the final, impossible wave of redefinition. His feathered crest was flat against his skull, a sign of absolute, primal terror. He finally opened a channel to the Council. His voice was a whisper. The humans. They did not fight the Zarn. They did not defeat the Zarn. They unmade them. They took a thinking storm and turned it into rain. We need to understand what kind of species we have allowed into our galaxy. Ambassador Alara Vance, still sitting calmly in the council chamber, received the report on her personal datapad. She read it, nodded once, and then looked up at the frozen, horrified faces of the 70 council ambassadors. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply spoke, in that same gravelly voice. You asked for our war fleet. You saw what it can do. Now, let's talk about what you owe us for this. And let me be clear, she leaned forward, and for the first time, her eyes showed the cold, patient fire that lived inside every human. We are not here to be your soldiers. We are not here to be your heroes. We are here because you needed someone who knew how to end a fight permanently. That's what we do. We don't win battles. We erase problems. She stood up, tucked the datapad into her jacket, and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back. By the way, that Echo ship, the one we flew into the heart of the swarm. She waited a beat. It wasn't automated. The pilot volunteered. She knew she wouldn't come back. Her name was Mina Sokolov. She was 23 years old. She had a kid. So when you're calculating our battle credit, don't forget to add the price of a human life. They're not cheap. She left the council in stunned silence. Behind her, on the main view screen, the gray rain of what used to be the Zarn Collective continued to fall gently through the void, sparkling in the distant light of a dying star. The human fleet was already gone, having folded space back toward their own unremarkable, unimpressive, and utterly terrifying little world. In the following days, the Council's best scientists tried to analyze the human tactics. They wrote long, complex reports filled with equations and theories. But one young Xylith analyst, a drone who had not yet learned to filter his thoughts, wrote a single line that was passed around the council in secret, causing a shiver to run through every species that read it. The humans did not invent a new weapon, the drone wrote. They remembered an old one. They remembered that the universe is not made of energy or matter. It is made of stories. And they told the Zarn a story in which they did not exist. The Tsarn believed it. And so they vanished. That was the moment the Galactic Council truly understood what it meant to share a galaxy with humanity. It was not a partnership. It was a warning label. And the warning said, "Do not poke the bear. The bear will not roar. The bear will rewrite your mythology." The human war fleet returned home to a hero's welcome that lasted exactly 1 week. Then, the people of Earth and Mars and the asteroid belts went back to their ordinary lives. They complained about taxes, argued about sports, and watched reality shows about baking bread. They did not dwell on the Tsarn. They did not celebrate the slaughter. They just moved on, because that was the final, most terrifying thing about humans. They could erase Ascension Storm from the fabric of reality, and then go home and worrying about whether their pet cat was eating enough. The universe had seen many empires rise and fall, but it had never seen anything as casually, bone-deep dangerous as a species that could commit genocide and then feel slightly guilty about forgetting to take out the trash. The gray rain continued to fall. In a small apartment on Earth, a woman named Mina Sokolov's mother sat at a kitchen table, staring at a photograph of her daughter in a graduation cap. She was not thinking about the Tsarn Collective. She was not thinking about the Galactic Council. She was thinking about how her daughter used to burn toast every single morning, and how the smell of charcoal had always been the signal that a new day had begun. She lit a candle, put the photograph next to it, and whispered, "You did good. Mina, you did real good." Outside her window, the stars were silent. But for the first time in a long, long time, the silence was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a universe that had just learned to be very, very polite to the hairless apes from the Third Rock. The human fleet's after-action report, filed by Admiral Gion, was 3 pages long. The final paragraph read, "Objective achieved. Enemy neutralized. No further threats in this sector. Recommend we send a diplomatic team to the Council to negotiate payment in FTL coil technology and mineral rights to the Thrax system. Also, recommend a posthumous Medal of Valor for pilot First Class Mina Sokolov. She burned her toast this morning one last time. It smelled like victory." The report was stamped approved and filed away in the Terran Federation's Central Archive, which was located in a converted parking garage in downtown Chicago. The archivist, a bored teenager named Leo, read the report, shrugged, and put it in the boring space stuff folder. He then went back to playing a video game on his Datapada game about building a medieval castle. The castle was under attack by imaginary dragons. Leo was very good at the game. He had learned from the best, and somewhere, in the cold between galaxies, the last, fading echo of the paradox wave finally dissipated. The Tsarn Collective did not exist. It had never existed. The only proof that it had ever been was a file in a converted parking garage in a mid-sized city on a middling planet orbiting a perfectly average star. That was the human way. They didn't build monuments to their victories. They built parking lots. Because they were already thinking about the next problem, the next fight, the next burned piece of toast. And the universe, for all its wonders and terrors, had no answer for that kind of relentless, mundane, magnificent stubbornness. The war was over. But for the humans, the work had just begun. There were colonies to feed, ships to repair, and most importantly a new kind of coffee to try on the space station orbiting Jupiter. Priorities, after all, are what separate the species that survive from the species that become gray rain, and humanity had always been very, very good at setting its own priorities.